This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting of the Arizona Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to order. I'd like to establish a quorum. Frank Thorwald.
Dale Nations.
Stephen Cooper.
Mike Conway.
Bill Fire Robin.
We have a quorum. Is there any conflicts of interest? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item. Has Director Cabrera joined us yet? No.
I don't see him.
Okay. Discussion and consideration of vote for our February 11th meeting. Does anybody have any changes for that those meeting minutes? Any discussion about them?
I move the adoption of the February 11th, 2022 minutes as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Nations. Do we have a second? And remember to announce yourself so we know who you are.
This is Commissioner Cooper. I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to the next item, New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium Facility Tour. Commissioner Firebrand, we've got the Director of DEQ that could join us at any particular moment. He's off-site and only has a few minutes, so when he comes on, we may interrupt your presentation.
Sure, that's okay. So
I'm gonna pull up the presentation now. Just give me 1 second.
Chairman Thorwald, this is Misael Cabrera. Just wanted to let you know that I'm joining via voice.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Please, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to make sure you were, I told everybody that when you came on, we would stop whatever else we were doing, so knowing your time schedule.
Oh, thank you. So my interest this morning was simply to communicate our support for the grant efforts that the Commission is seeking, and let you know that our governor and us agree that it's a priority to help secure those funds from the Department of Interior. And so we've put a small team of folks together that understand the priority. We're working with the governor's office as well, and just wanted to let the board know that we are doing what we can to help the Commission secure those grant funds. And if there's any specific questions, I'm happy to address them.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the director? Well, hearing none, I want to thank you for not only coming on to talk to us today, but appreciate your efforts and what the team that you've put together. I know this is a complex issue, and our lack of staff hasn't helped much, but I appreciate it. Could you take a moment and just be a little more specific of what the team includes?
Sure. So we have talked with our chief procurement officer so that we can leverage existing contracts for the well plugging scope if we receive the grant monies. We've assigned a senior program manager who runs she runs all of our remediation work. We've assigned her to mentor Marta. we've asked our air quality team to produce more administrative help, and we've asked Daniel Chekalinsky, which is one of our division directors, to work with MARTA directly to eliminate any other obstacles that might come up. In addition to that, we have a request into the Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting, asking them to set up a specific fund to receive these monies, so that the Oil and Gas Commission can have a separate fund that clearly belongs to the Oil and Gas Commission for making decisions on how to fund these projects for well identification and plugging, plus administrative support. And we're just committed to helping the commission do whatever it takes to secure this federal funding.
We really appreciate that. Commissioners, do any of you want to expand on that or ask any additional questions? I think everybody's very happy to hear that. I appreciate it. We're going to be talking more about that later. In fact, we're about to get a presentation on desalinization from produced water and how that will work here. It could work here in Arizona. One of the commissioners went over to New Mexico to tour the national federal facilities over there and what they're doing. We've been working with that organization, or a member of it, and EPA has designated them as the point person on produced water in the United States. So
fantastic.
If you have the opportunity to stay on for a little while, I welcome you to do so. And I understand you have to go at any moment.
Thank you so much, Chairman Thorwald. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner, would you proceed? Mr. Commissioner Fire-Robin, would you proceed there? Thank you.
Sure, okay. So I went over to take a tour of the Bureau of Reclamation, their Brackish Groundwater National Desalination Research Facility. Quite a name. Can't even, it's quite a name. But let's go on to the next slide. So it is located in Alamogordo. I got the map here just to be sure you kind of know where. Alamogordo is a town that is right on the edge of the mountains, like so many western towns. And it turns out the basin, the groundwater basin there is nicely stratified, getting more and more salty at depth. So they locate, one of the reasons to locate there was that you could pull waters from different depths to mix salinities to get what you want to run particular experiments. So that was the particular strength of Alamogordo, besides which there's a long history of federal research there and whatnot. The other thing, just to show you the charm of the pre-digital meeting age, is one of the strengths was it was an hour's drive down to New Mexico State University in Las Cruces. So they felt an hour drive gets them easy access to the academic part of this whole question. Next slide. So that facility is really designed to be flexible. What it's made is for people to come in and go out, come in for an experiment, complete their work and leave. So it's got offices, conference rooms, lab rooms, change shower bathrooms, test space on concrete pads for spill protection. They've got those pads both under a patio-like roof, 2-story and outdoor, and it's got really easy access with to the town with plenty of restaurants and motels. Next. So everything there is pilot scale. This is looking on in the concrete pads under the kind of patio-like roof. And they've got equipment set up when we were there to test different types of filtration. two types of reverse osmosis. Next. And outside on a pad in a trailer is this equipment for heat treatment of waters with oil and gas. It looks like a bunch of vertical oil refineries. That's pretty much what it does. It vaporizes the gas and petroleum components out the top where they can be collected and sold. And that little spout in the middle is where then the product waters come out after they've boiled or heated off the oil and gas. Next. So we need to kind of define terms here. A brine, in a general sense, is any water that is infused with salts. So the broad way of measuring quality is called total dissolved solids, or TDS. You'll see that all the time. And that is a measure of everything that's in the water, organic, inorganic, and it's the sum of all, everything, sodium, calcium, potassium, chloride, sulfite, nitrate, everything that's in the waters. It's usually measured in parts per million or ppm. And just to note, 1% is 10,000 ppm. So kind of the boundaries that have been set up for words. Fresh water is 0 to 1,000 ppm TDS. Brackish water, you can see up to 10,000 ppm TDS. And saline waters are up to 35,000 ppm TDS. The current technology, what they were talking about is up to 25,000 ppm TDS. Just as a note, seawater usually is about 3.5% or 35,000 ppm TDS. So we're a little under seawater. And then the official term brines, not just the generic definition, but the official term from the U.S. Geological Survey is something that contains more than 35,000 ppm TDS. Okay, next. So they had the fluids from 2 oil fields that they were running tests on when we were there. The first was a field up in the Farmington area, and it's actually pretty clean. So they tried simple filtration followed by reverse osmosis, which yields fresh water by TDS standards, but it contains 2 ppm boron, and that is above the 1 ppm drinking water limit for boron. So they're experimenting with treatments to meet drinking water standards. But there's a moral from this particular one, from the boron. So if we're going to be producing waters for drinking water, it's more than just removing the sodium, calcium, so on and so forth. You need to look at some of these trace elements that can be above drinking water standards. Those could be a little bit more difficult to remove. So part of what you want to look for is, as you're judging brackish waters, are these other elements like boron, vanadium, and so on. Next slide. They had a sample from the Permian Basin, which kind of straddles New Mexico and Texas. Now, the initial water really but I've also got samples of what the stuff looked like after different stages of treatment. You can see after heat treatment to remove the oil and petroleum and reverse osmosis. It's not fresh water, but it's suitable for some industrial and agricultural uses. So they'll keep running tests on that, see how far down they can, or how far up the quality scale they can drive it. Next. So one issue that you're always going to have is disposal of the concentrate. And the math is clear. You're just going to have it. If you begin with a water of 75 units of water and 25 units of TDS, then these are just numbers out of the air. Excuse me, sorry, a phone call, but you begin with 75 water, 25 TDS, separate out 60 unit water that has 1 unit of TDS. That's good quality, but it leaves you 15 units of water with 24 units of TDS. So it's a super concentrated brine. Whatever the particular numbers are, the math always works out this way, that you're producing a concentrate that has pretty high TDS concentrations. And so the question becomes, what are you going to do with that? Well, there are places like El Paso that use the desalination to meet their municipal needs. And they're set up with the ability, what they do with it is then pump it down back into the unit that they originally used to bring up waters for treatment. So it's something my understanding is Arizona is not really set up for that yet, but it's something we can see coming. So we could go ahead and get started on the regulatory environment for that. Next. So why is this important now? Next. And I think in Arizona, what we see all the time is our supply of fresh water is getting further away and deeper and generally more expensive. And you might just toss out the comment, we'll throw in another Central Arizona project. That first one took 20 years to build. It cost about $4 billion by government accounting. I did grab some numbers off the interstate or at the internet just to see what that would amount to. And I come up with it is the equivalent to approximate equivalent to building a 4-lane freeway from Los Angeles to Tucson. And it also is the largest single user of electricity for the pumps in the state of Arizona, besides which the Colorado River is already fully allocated. So I think you look at all these things and the regulatory hurdles, it's tough to do a big project. Next slide. So where else can you look for water? Well, it turns out brackish water is naturally fills parts of some Arizona aquifers. They've never been tapped because we didn't have the treatment methods to handle them. I keep thinking back on the old steam boilers with condensation coils as the old kind of desalination. So that was just too expensive, didn't really work. So those waters are really still there. Next slide. And what's really driving the interest in desalination is the costs are coming down. They're coming down about 2% a year. You can see freshwater costs are continually going up. I mean, we're having to deepen water wells. You know, it's just becoming more expensive to get fresh water to the faucet. So about 2000, in a broad way, the cost of desalination fell below the cost of fresh water. On average, it costs about $5 per 1,000 gallons now, but that can vary depending on the size of the plant you have. If you have a small plant, it's going to cost you $5 or $8 per 1,000 gallons. If you have a really large municipal plant, your cost will only be a few dollars per 1,000 gallons. Next. So when Arizona is ready, they're ready to receive test samples of our brackish water. They put them in these the black 100-barrel tanks in the background. And so they're ready to help us test our waters when we're ready to take that step. Go ahead next. And that is the end. Any questions?
Commissioners, Director, do you have any questions for Commissioner Firebrand? I have a couple questions. What are the alternate uses for the salt and the other minerals? Can they be used for de-icing roadways? Can they be used in other products? What is available besides injection?
Yeah, that's something you need that we could take a look at too, is putting those concentrates to other uses. I mean, there are other uses. And of course, that depends on what you started with, what you end up with, what the different concentration of different chemicals are, and chemical entities, and which ones we really need. It's kind of my experience when you have these jumble of things, the issue then separate out what you can use from what you really can't use in a further sense, okay?
The produced water that we're talking about.
Produced water, yeah. Okay, so they can, if you have a amenable source of brackish water, you can produce water that meets drinking water standards. Or as I pointed out in some of those, one thing we might have to think about if we get to using brackish water is because of things like boron, maybe that you can use it for agriculture or industrial uses, but not for drinking water. Or maybe produce it for that use and then some parts further refine it into drinking water standards.
What would be the additional cost for being able to bring it down to be able to use for livestock or humans?
I think the only numbers I have are those I gave, and those are for, I think, the drinking water standards. So I assume the numbers too, because it's the same process, it just, you're beginning with something that's a little chemically a little less amenable to treatment, that your cost would be about those I gave you for industrial purposes. I mean, you run it through the same process. So I think they would be pretty similar.
Can the concentrates be used for solution mining?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Can any of the concentrates be used? Can the concentrates be used for any particular type of solution mining?
You know, that's actually the part that interests me, and I'd like to look into that further. So I'd rather put off the answer till the future if I could.
A future presentation to enhance on this, that would be good.
Maybe?
My last question, did you talk any about the demonstration project operating by solar to do desalinization on a particular produced water project here in Arizona?
Hold on, Frank, I'm sorry, 1 minute. Could you repeat that? I just had an aircraft go over, like I said. For some reason, the volume on my computer is really low. It's tough to hear, particularly with any other sound. And,
What I was asking about was that with the demonstration project for solar-powered desalinization that DOE is looking at doing here with our produced water in Arizona, did you get any discussion about that at all while you were there?
no, we did not talk about that at all. It's a good question.
From what I've understood, that would drop the cost down from being able to desalinate it, not to take it to be able to use for crops to that level, but down in the 50 cent to $1 range per 1,000 gallons.
Yeah, it might be. I think those costs are referring to, the methods that they're working with now, which is really using the focused on reverse osmosis, and you might do some filtration ahead of time. So if you tweak that or use another methodology, you might well be able to bring costs down more.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions on this before we proceed to the next item?
Yeah, Mike Conway here. Bill, what is the, do they have a time frame for scaling this up and actually going into production?
We didn't get into that. They're really a pilot plant scale, as you can see from the photos. That's what they do. And then I'm assuming, but I'm not in this field, I'm in mineral exploration, that from this point you would hand it off for detailed engineering would be the next step. And then you build a larger demo plant or maybe a production plant, however that falls out. I did not talk. I actually asked that question in an email that kind of got overlooked in everything, so I need to go back and re-ask it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other further questions? Thank you, Commissioner, for going up there and taking a look, and I look forward to hearing further discussions and presentations in the future about this. Moving on to our public, we voted on the public meeting. Let's see. Moving on to the Pentadome Operating LLC. Administrator Hoden, would you please brief us on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chairman Thorwald, I just want to let you know I'm going to drop off now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, with respect to Pentadome operating, this agenda item was moved from last month's meeting agenda to this month's meeting agenda. An update based on the input that I received from the commissioners in the last meeting was that they would like to wait until all required documentation is received. At this time, I'm still working with Pentadome operating to get the last of those documents received, and we're in the process of sorting out the bond with them right now. I have received the organization report from them, as well as the letter of release from the previous operator of the asset, but I am planning to move this agenda item to the May meeting, at which point we'll have all of the documentation required to formally discuss and potentially vote on the transfer of those assets.
AG Belgian, we have somebody from the land department that can further brief us on that. Is it all right for them to brief us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if the land department representative is speaking on agenda item number 4, Pentadome operating, that there's no problem with
Thank
that.
you. Todd, are you on with us? Todd?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, DeLigi with the Arizona Department. I'm a geologist in the Minerals Department. I've handled the lease assignment in question here. Rare Earth Exploration held state lease 13-120383, where the subject well is located. That lease was assigned over to a company called Phoenix Minerals LLC. That effective date of transfer was February 7th, 2022. So that lease now is held by Mr. Bob Shear of Phoenix Minerals. In an email that he sent to ASLD, he has explained to us that This is a part of a joint venture, and it is working with the AOGCC and Pentadome Operating here as the operating firm for that particular company to assume the responsibility for the well. Mr. Scheer has been informed as well from the Arizona State Land Department perspective that he needs a geological field operation plan in place and approved prior to doing any work on state leases. And so that's currently where we are with that particular lease.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioners, do you have any questions? Administrator Hoden, do you have any other things that you need to talk about on this subject?
Nope, I think that covers everything. Thank you, Todd, for that update.
Thank you. Moving on then to item 6, report by the Oil and Gas Administrator. Administrator Hoden, do you want to proceed?
Absolutely. First, I'll touch on the drilling and completions activities that have occurred since the last meeting. In the last meeting, I mentioned that there were 2 additional Desert Mountain Energy permits that had been submitted but had not been approved yet. Those 2 permits, the 3-1 and the 10-1, were reviewed and approved following the last meeting, and since have all 3 of the wells that they've had approved this year have been drilled. And Desert Mountain Energy indicated this week that they intend to come back and perforate to complete those wells within 3 to 4 or so weeks. And we'll continue to be in communication with the commission as those activities proceed. Next would be 6B. So I just wanted to give the commissioners an update with respect to some of the new operator pre-application meetings that have been held so far this year. Mostly I included this agenda item to make the commission aware of the fact that we've definitely seen an increase in activity and an increase in interest from new operators in the last few months. I've held several new operator introduction meetings, this year. Definitely an uptick since I've joined the commission. And so I just wanted to make everybody aware that I anticipate, this increased interest and increased communications to in the near future to lead to increased activity levels. And I anticipate more applications in the near future. Additionally, all of these operators in these pre-application meetings, we go through the regulatory requirements and we go through and discuss, they have the opportunity to ask questions, and we give them contacts within other agencies and the other requirements associated with drilling as well, so that they can get all their ducks in a row and get all the appropriate regulatory permits in place prior to drilling any wells. Next would be federal funding opportunities. So this will be a bit of a big one in terms of updates. And so
Administrator Hoden,
yes.
What we might want to do, because there's a lot here, is just ask the commissioners if they have any questions on each of the items before you proceed to the next one.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the 2 previous items? Drilling activity or pre-application meetings? Okay, I will continue with federal funding opportunities. So I decided for this meeting to break up this into the 3 different types of federal funding, federal grant opportunities that we have available to us. And so I'll start with discussing the initial grant. And so with our letter of intent that was submitted in December of 2021, the Department of Interior indicated that Arizona is eligible for $25 million in initial grant funding. So what we've been doing in the last few months since that letter of intent was submitted is we've been working with the Department of Interior as well as the AZOGCC, so the Interstate Oil and Gas Conservation Compact. Forgive me, too many acronyms. Anyways, we've been working with them on, and many other states, all the other interested and affected states that are interested in this funding, on guidance for the application process for those initial grants. And since the last meeting, draft guidance for the initial grant application has been published by the Department of Interior. I included a link in our guide or in the agenda here for anyone who's interested in taking a look at the press release that was issued by the Department of Interior. Within that press release, and I will just pull it up real quickly so I can show you guys. Forgive me. Within this press release, there's going to be a link here that says draft guidance. If you click on that, it'll open up the draft guidance that was published by the Department of Interior for review if anyone wants to take a look at that. And so what we've been doing since we received this draft guidance, well, before we received the draft guidance, we met with the Department of Interior and they discussed the anticipated draft guidance and asked states for their comments. We participated in that. We submitted questions and comments on what they presented to us and addressed some of our concerns. We echoed sentiments of some other states' concerns with respect to some of the language in the guidance. And so at this time, they are waiting for feedback from each of the states as well as the public on the draft guidance language. I know that several states have issued formal comments on the guidance, and we anticipate that the final guidance will be issued in the first week or so of April. And so when we receive the final guidance, then we can start compiling our application and getting an application ready to submit. What we know at this point based on the draft guidance is that the deadline for submission of the application for the initial grant funds will be May 13th. I previously stated May 15th, but the 13th is a Friday, so that will be the deadline. And so as Director Cabrera indicated, we are working closely with ADEQ to get a team in place to help us, get the right people to compile this application. If you take a look at the draft guidance, it can be a very, very detailed application process. There's a lot of information that's requested, both required information as well as recommended information. And we're looking as a state at what is best suited for Arizona and based on our needs as a state as well, and which components we would like to include in our application. All right, are there any questions on the initial grant, since that's what we're working on right now?
Administrator Hoden, Frank Thorwald, Commissioner Thorwald, you might want to mention Department of Energy and their grants as well.
Absolutely. The Department of Energy's federal funding, we're working with the Department of Energy. They have a slightly different bucket of funds that are specific to undocumented orphaned wells. This bucket of funds for the initial grant is for documented orphaned wells, so there's a slight difference there. So undocumented wells would indicate wells we don't even know exist yet. There's an understanding across the United States that there is a significant number of undocumented wells that states just don't have any documentation of that are in existence. And so we've been working with the Department of Energy on their plan and their guidance on how they would recommend to states, as well as what funding opportunities they may make available based on the infrastructure bill for pursuing, knowledge of those undocumented wells in order to make them documented and then be able to properly plug them.
Is there any questions for our administrator?
Yeah, this is Mike Conway. Marta, I saw that there were 2 initiation grant proposal types, one for 5 million, second for 25 million. What you decide to go for the $25 million grant?
So when we put together our letter of intent for the formula grant that was submitted in December, we did a calculation based on our estimated number, and I'll say as I've indicated in past meetings with respect to the work that Jim Ballard helped us put together, and we looked through a historical dive of well records in order to identify wells that may not have been properly plugged or abandoned, wells that lack documentation of plugging or have incomplete plugging records. records. So that is what I would call a draft list of orphaned wells is right now. There's additional work that'll be needed to ensure that those are truly orphaned wells and narrow that list down or expand that list to be determined. But that list is about 246 wells right now, and so with that number of wells, we were able to get a rough estimate based on depth of those wells for plugging costs. And then we did some calculations for the total number of wells and plugging costs. And simply for plugging costs, we came up with about $14 million in costs associated with just the plugging. That doesn't include administration of the program. That doesn't include the pre-work that would be required to properly go through all of these wells, assess sites, additional remediation work that may be required in addition to plugging. And so the federal government, based on our letter of intent, indicated that they believed, and we agree, that we would be eligible for the full $25 million rather than the $5 million grant.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Administrator Houghton, Commissioner Thorwald, you might add in the total amount of money that we're eligible for in addition to the 25, as
Yes.
well as the potential for other funds, which I'll address more later.
Those are my next two bullet points, Frank, so I will
Fantastic.
get into those in just a second. Absolutely. If there aren't any other questions specific to the initial grant, I will move on to, so as Commissioner Thorwald just mentioned, there are additional funds as well. Everyone's aware that we submit our letter of intent for a formula grant. And so the Department of Interior indicated that Arizona, in the phase 1 of funding for formula grant funding, we would be eligible for $1.262 million of additional funds on top of the $25 million. So that puts us at 26.26. Additionally, they've indicated that there will be a phase 2 of formula grant funding where Arizona is eligible for an additional $3 million. And so that would bring our total up to just over $29 million in federal funding for the documented orphaned well programs. Additionally, I'll move on and then we can come back and ask questions for the performance grant update. So performance grants, there's another broad spectrum of grants that are going to be covered under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that will cover a bunch of different areas. Specifically for Arizona, we're interested in performance grants that are specific to regulatory improvements. There's funding that's going to be available for states to improve their regulations in order to prevent future orphan and abandoned wells, deter and prevent future orphan and abandoned wells. And so we believe that, our state rules need an overhaul in order to bring them up to modern standards, and we could use the regulatory improvement performance grant funds to take a deep dive into our rules, continue the dive we've already been doing, and assess what other states are doing and figure out where Arizona needs to be in order to prevent future orphan and abandoned wells. That will likely include something like an assessment and review of our financial assurance and bonding structure and other plugging methods and plugging requirements in the state. Things like that would be included within that performance grant money. Are there any questions on formula or performance grants? Actually, I just thought of one more thing I want to add on the formula grant update, just so that you kind of understand the difference between the initial grant and the formula grant funds. The purpose of those funds is similar in that the $29.262 million it's a big pool of money to be used for plugging of orphan and abandoned wells, documented orphan and abandoned wells. The difference between the formula grant money is that the formula grant funds have a bit more, I would say, rigorous application process. And so what the Department of Interior has indicated is that some of the things that are in the draft guidance for the initial grant that are considered recommended at this point may be considered required for formula grant funds. So there's just a little bit more rigor with respect to what the federal government will require in your application for formula grant funds, as well as the timelines for spending the funds, some of the limitations on what the funds, limitations or even maybe expansion on what the funds can be used for. So it's just slightly different, but overall, It is kind of a similar structure in that it can all be used for plugging of orphan and abandoned wells. Any questions? All right, if no questions, I will move on to 6D, which would be the progress update for the website redesign and the timeline. A quick update on this, I've had recent discussions with DEQ with respect to moving forward with publishing the website. At this point, given the changes and focus on our priorities with respect to the grant funding and orphan and abandoned well program, what we've decided is to move forward with publishing the new website, but that's specific to the new code language. What this means is that the website at this point may appear very, very similar to what it looks like now, but the good thing is that on the back end, the new code language will be much easier to make changes, make modifications, updates in the future as our priorities allow. And as we create content, one of the big things that they are actively working on right now is getting the recordings of our meetings to be published on our website. So that is one active change that will be made on the website as it goes live. Additionally, publishing of the production data is something that I am actively pursuing in terms of making it a live change on the new website. But in terms of other updates, structural changes, and some of the big, more appearance changes, those will happen slowly over time into the future. We just didn't want to hold off the code language change any longer, and we just decided to move forward with that aspect of it for the time being. Any questions on the website?
Marta, Administrator Hoden, Commissioner Thorwald, with respect to that, talk about some of the federal funds that we're looking at and the uses of those with respect to the website and what they're also going to be requiring in that area.
Absolutely. So within the initial grant and formula grant programs, there is language to indicate some of the requirements with respect to reporting of the information and status of the program. And so within the grant guidance, there is room to use funds for making information available to the public, and therefore you can interpret that to mean, and we've received confirmation that this can be used to update our website in order to structure our website in a way that all of the required information that should be and will be made public to, or made available to the public, can be posted easily and smoothly on our website. So therefore those funds can be used for website changes.
Administrator Hoden, two other things, if we could quickly talk about it in this area, would be the use of being able to report wells that we don't know about and the PSAs, the public service announcements for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the conversations with respect to undocumented wells, undocumented orphaned wells, is that we intend to include on the website with updates on the program of plugging of orphan and abandoned wells, some links and information for the public or landowners who may be aware of a well on their property that they don't necessarily have any records for, they don't know who, any of the background information. They can report those wells to us through our website, through that contact information. And that way those wells can also be assessed and determine whether or not they are under the jurisdiction of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Obviously, we would also look at DWR to ensure these aren't water wells that would fall under different jurisdiction, but it would provide an opportunity for the public and landowners and operators, etc. If you're aware of something, a well out there that we're not aware of, we don't have records of, you could submit that information. And forgive me, what was the other thing you requested?
The PSAs, I'll talk about that when I get there.
Okay.
Any
Any other questions?
This is Commissioner Nations. Marta, is there any concern about finding operators to do the remediation of these wells whenever the funds are available?
So this is definitely a conversation being had right now. Director Cabrera gave a little bit of an update with respect to working with DEQ's procurement team. So this is definitely a concern we've been discussing with DEQ, and the reason I say it's a concern is simply that some of the guidance, if you look through the draft guidance, indicates that the states must allocate 90% of the funds within 90 days. And so this is a very, very tight timeline. And the state of Arizona's procurement period for contracts tends to take a bit longer than that, or can take longer than that. And so what we're assessing right now is whether or not we can use existing contracts that are already in place, whether that be for a primary contractor, and then the contract would allow them to hire subcontractors, which may be operators or vendors who have experience, will be operators or vendors who have experience doing this work. But that being said, we're looking at existing contracts to try to expedite the process for procurement in order to allocate these funds within that time restriction. Additionally, we anticipate, we will be seeking interest from operators and vendors within the state, because it is ideal to use vendors and operators who are Arizona state employees. We want to bring the jobs to our state to do this work. But if we have to explore, service providers in New Mexico or Utah, etc., we're willing to look at those opportunities as well, depending on what is available. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Administrator Hoden, let me add to that. This is Commissioner Thorwald, or Chairman Thorwald. The governor's office is also involved, and the governor's assigned a point person to move things along and streamline things as we move forward. So I've been in communication with them, and they're getting started on that. And that will be helpful as we move forward. Director Cabrera had put me in touch with them, so that has been a helpful piece. The director has also been in touch with the Office of Procurement at ADOA, and has been working with them on this same subject as well. The one of the sides that we may have is in this is that it's going to happen over a period of time. Just because we have to allocate it within 90 days doesn't mean we have to. The work has to be done within 90 days. It's over a longer period. And Marty, Administrator Hoden, you might talk about that in a moment. So the other thing is that we have to have companies that have certain amount of experience within the oil and gas industry, and in our area, helium. So that also may cause some limitations on the number of parties out there, and as well as the 36 other states looking for firms to do this at the same time. And the Department of Interior has taken that into consideration. Administrator Hoden, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo your sentiment that just because you must allocate, the term allocation is simply just contract the work within 90 days. It's not implying that any work needs to be completed within 90 days, although obviously we intend to start work as soon as possible. We just need to do all the appropriate pre-work and ensure that everything's being done per Arizona regulation and up to our standards. And so just allocation of those funds needs to be done within 90 days. And I don't in front of me have the length at which, the number of years at which that we can spread the work over, but it is many years. I want to say like 8 years, but I don't have the date in front of me. So there's definitely an extended amount of time to do the work, which, part of the application process is ranking wells and priority for plugging wells and how you are assessing wells in order to rank them. And so, it can, we'll be taking that ranking into consideration. Obviously, location will be taken into consideration on how you plug things to make it most efficient for our operators.
Administrator Houghton, would you also talk about that this is not just the wells, but the surface and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. And I noted that a little bit when discussing the initial grant funds, and that or the formula grant. When we applied for the formula grant, we came up with a number specific to plugging costs. The funds can also be used for remediation of the surface, for assessment of any possible contamination or remediation if there is any indication of contamination, monitoring if there's any indication of contamination. Not to say we are aware of any of that at this point. Those are all things we will be looking into as we perform our review of these wells. But that being said, the funds can be used for many things. And like I mentioned, we as a state are determining which aspects of the guidance, which aspects of those recommended guidance specific to, groundwater monitoring or site remediation, et cetera, are necessary for our wells based on the site assessments. Does that cover what you needed, Frank?
It did. Any further questions on this, commissioners? Administrator Houghton, please proceed.
All right, I will move on to 6E, rules update. First, I'll just touch on the 5-year rule review. At this point, due to limited capacity, we're drafting an additional 120-day extension. My intention is to have that out today for consideration by GERC, and the intention is to request to push this just so that we can get past this immediate time crunch right now required for the application process, as well as the allocation process for those federal funds, because they're taking up so much of our resources. Next, kind of in line with resource limitation would be jumping to the proposed statutory changes and rule package status. I'll kind of address those both together. We hope to bring these two things up our priority list as soon as the federal funding application is submitted and contracts are awarded. Additionally, as I mentioned, some of the performance bond or performance grant funding, if those funding opportunities become available to us for Arizona, that will obviously bring it to a top priority immediately in terms of the application process for those funds. But either way, the rule package and statutory changes are the next on our priority list in terms of things to get done as soon as we get past this time crunch on the application process. Any questions about rules? All right, web portal updates. I don't really have any specific updates with respect to a web portal, but I will echo the sentiment that we discussed with the website, in that there's a potential that these federal funds, due to the requirement for publishing information associated with the plugging of these wells, there is the potential that those funds could also be used for creation of a portal for those type of resources. So that's something we are looking into. Additionally, yes.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to jump to the procedures and manuals. No real update there.
Okay. If I may, I comment with regard to the web portal and the website. I had a verbal conversation with the person in charge of this for Department of Interior Director of Office Environment Policy and Compliance, and on questions that we had. And he told me that this would be allowed for the website and the web portal to get information in and out quickly. So we do not have that in writing yet, but hopefully we will have that in the next steps.
And I'll just add on to that. In the application process, a detailed budget will be included in the application. And so as we understand how something like website updates or a web portal could be included in the budget to utilize these funds, we will make the commission aware of those.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Commissioner Nations,
Go ahead, Commissioner Nations.
I'm a little puzzled about the agenda items. Item 4, Pentadome operating, or did we just bypass that, or what happened there?
I thought we did that.
We did.
We did, yes.
Oh, okay.
We
And
didn't.
then
We did not vote on that or consider the item. The agenda item will be moved to the next commission meeting when all required documentation is submitted by that operator.
Oh, I see. How about item 6A, reports on the drilling?
Yes, I talked about the Desert Mountain Energy wells.
Yeah. Are those are the objectives, drilling objectives, available to us for those wells? Are they Shinneramp, or are they Coconino, or both?
The applications and the approved permits are on the website to look at. Additionally, those wells have all completed drilling, and I'm in process of getting all of the information, reported information through TD up onto the well viewer. Hopefully have that up there soon with the help of our intern. But if you would like anything specific, shoot me an email and I can get it sent over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to see the objectives information available, whether it's Shinneramp or Coconino.
In their applications, they do include a wellbore and indication of their zone of interest.
Okay. All right.
I don't have them in front of me though, so I'm sorry, I can't answer your question right now.
That's all right.
Is there any other questions on 6 or on 4? Anybody need any additional information? Not hearing any other questions with respect to the procedures manual or the portal that Administrator Hoden just talked about. Hearing none, moving on to item 7, report by the chairman. 7A, the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact we've been on the phone with them sometimes multiple times a week, bi-weekly. There's certainly been weekly communications by email on all of this. They are taking the lead for the states in working with Department of Energy and the Department of Interior on this as an advisory role. And they've been very helpful through this. The next meeting is in Oklahoma City in May, the 14th through the 17th, and I will be attending that. And they keep providing, as I said, good advice and help in moving us forward. 7B, the New Mexico Produced Water Consortium. We have been continuing to meet with them, Administrator Hoden and myself, to discuss the produced water, where it's going, and the guidance to various states. And there's a subgroup that were involved in doing that. And they were the ones that were kind enough to take us over to take Commissioner Firerobin over in New Mexico and go around with them and with him and talk about the various things. And they're continuing to work with us. And they are the ones that introduced the people that were interested in doing a demonstration project for Department of Energy to us. Is there any questions on either one of those items so far? Moving on to 7C, the budget. We have not had to spend any money in those areas, and our budget is changing a little bit, as Marta indicated earlier, Administrator Hoden, and that will be further discussed in the future. Item 7D, Office of Navajo and Hopi Indian Relocation. I have to congratulate Jim Ballard once again. He helped us, it looks like, get another $5 or $6 million in addition to that 29 million. It turns out that I've been pressing the Department of Interior and Department of Energy and a few other organizations to find out who's going to have authority on the split estates on Navajo and Hopi Indian relocation land. And I've been in touch with them as well as some different members of the Navajo Nation to talk about this. And I still have a conversation that I have to have with their Attorney General's office, which I need to call back on. But what the final advice that we had got and direction from the Department of Interior was that because it is a split estate and O'Neill has the surface and the state has the mineral rights below, that the state would be the ones that is eligible for the funds to plug those. And so that means there's potential coordination that is needed between the Navajo Nation and the Oil and Gas Commission to do that. And you have a map of those O'Neill lands that I asked Administrator Hoden to send out to you, so you can see specifically the areas we're talking about within the state. I don't remember the exact numbers of wells that we have found that there as potential under the same kind of guidance that the other wells in Arizona have been found, but I think it's in the 40s somewhere. I will have to come back to you on that. So that will be additional work we have to do, and contracting specifically with access approval. Or how that's going to work, we don't know yet. Is there any questions on that? Nothing. Moving on to 7E, Vice Chairman Nations, do you have any comments or anything you want to discuss here?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Moving on to 7F, ADQ, I think we've already covered what they're doing, and that's a work in progress. Moving on to 7G, the legislation affecting the Oil and Gas Commission. There's a number of pieces of legislation that doesn't appear like they're going anywhere, but there is one that does look like it will pass, and it's the Hydrogen Study Committee. And if that one passes, we'll have some interaction with them with regard because of our control of underground storage. And I don't have any more specifics on that, but I will keep you posted. Moving on to 7H, the way the state law is set up, if we want somebody on the commission wants to go talk to the legislators to convince them to change a particular their view on a particular subject, or to move a piece of increase the funding for Oil and Gas Commission, or to get additional fees for different kinds of things. We need to be able to go talk to them, and to do that on a scale that's needed, we need to register somebody as a lobbyist. Now, that lobbyist is a non-paid lobbyist, and for instance, Director Cabrera at DEQ is registered as a lobbyist, and so are the senior staff of the different agencies that are doing this. So what I'm proposing is that I register as a lobbyist. I'll have to fill out all the paperwork for that. There will be no fee for that, doing that, but it will allow me to go before the legislators to talk about these subjects affecting the commission. And I would like to get the commission's, I don't know whether I need a formal or informal approval on that, to be able to go ahead and do that.
Well, I would, this is Commissioner Nations.
Yes.
I would approve that. I don't think we need a vote, but just as a statement.
Okay. Does the AG's office, do we need any kind of vote, or just an informal approval of that?
Chairman Thorwald, you don't technically need a vote, but I think it would make your position easier if the commission just voted on it, showing their approval.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any other questions or discussions on this?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Cooper. I certainly think it's a very wise idea to have you register as a lobbyist, but perhaps you may want to designate somebody else on the board or the administrator as a lobbyist, because there could come a time when something is occurring where we need to do something and you might not possibly be available because of other prior commitments.
That's a good idea. Does anybody else want to serve in that capacity? Because we don't have to have just one person. We could do two. I also I don't think the administrator could do this because of the complexities with DEQ, and they already have a lobbyist and an office of doing that. So I think there could be some adverse complications if Administrator Houghton was registered as a lobbyist.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Nations.
Yes.
I would like to ask for a vote to approve you as the primary lobbyist for the Oil and Gas Commission, but I think Commissioner Cooper would be an additional one that should be delegated.
Commissioner Cooper, do you have any interest in doing that?
Well, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Nations, I'm flattered that you would ask, but looking at the makeup of the board, I believe for the issues of oil and gas, I may be the least qualified person that's there. I have no problem with serving, but I do want to point out that I think that there are other commissioners that are more qualified to address these issues than I would be, but I can learn really quick.
How do the other commissioners feel about this? Mr. Firerobin, Commissioner Firerobin.
I like the idea, and I like the idea of having a second person. And I would be in favor of Commissioner Cooper being that second person.
Commissioner Conway, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm on board with that as well, with you as the primary and then Commissioner Cooper as a backup. I think that sounds great.
Commissioner Cooper, that means you would have to register. I'm sure you probably know the process and fill out the regular paperwork. If that's not a problem for you, then I'm all for it as well.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Cooper. I will do that, work out with staff, but I'm still puzzled what I did to the board to get this task.
Well, do we have a second for Commissioner Nation's motion?
This is Mike Conway. I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Moving on to call to the public. Is there anybody in the here that would like to make comments? Anybody in the public? This is your opportunity. Hearing none, let's move on to item 9, review and consideration of future agenda items. Commissioners, is there anything you would like to see on the agenda for our next meeting?
This is Bill. I'd still like us to take a look at the deposit monies that we're receiving for people drilling and be sure that we have enough monies to cover any eventual cost. Of course, if they do plugging properly and completely, it's returned to them, but just to be sure that we're covered. Have we kind of resolved that yet, or is that something that's still on the to-do list?
It's still on the to-do list.
Okay.
That's part of the rules package and some of the other legislative changes.
Okay.
Administrator Houghton, would you add that for further discussion at our next meeting?
Yes.
Anything else that we need to add for further discussion at our next meeting? Hearing none, do we have any announcements? Hearing no announcements, item 11, open meeting law presentation by Assistant Attorney General. We need to have a vote by the commissioners to go into executive session to talk about this.
And Chairman Thorwald, whoever makes the motion, I'll ask them to please say they move to go into executive session for agenda item 11, open meeting law, and for the purpose of obtaining legal advice.
Okay. I will make that a motion then. I move that we go into executive session regarding agenda item 11 to obtain legal advice. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. This is Commissioner Nations.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Then we will go into executive session and we will come back to the rest of the agenda items after we've finished executive session. All of you have a second to close out of this link. We can come back into it after executive session and use the other link that Administrator Houghton sent you to go into that.
This conference will now be recorded.
Commissioner Nations here.
Commissioner Thorwald.
Commissioner
Commissioner-
Cooper?
Mike Conway.
Bill,
We have a quorum. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Commissioner Cooper. I move to adjourn the meeting.
This is Commissioner Thorwald. I second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion has it. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.